Iran's latest missile drills over the Gulf are not just another military exercise. They come after a year in which Iran and Israel fought a 12-day air war. The United States bombed Iranian nuclear sites, and regional powers watched nervously as the risk of a broader conflict steadily grew. In the past few days, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy has staged a 2-day exercise in the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, firing volleys of ballistic and cruise missiles at simulated enemy targets. State media highlighted launches of Qadr 110 and Qadr 380 cruise missiles, as well as a new ballistic missile type known simply as 303. Drones struck mock enemy bases as commanders spoke of artificial intelligence and rapid response capabilities. The images are familiar. Missile launchers dug into desert positions, plumes of smoke rising over the coastline, and warships manoeuvring near one of the world's most critical energy choke points. But the political backdrop is very different from earlier drills. These exercises follow Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear sites in June, a wave of Iranian missile barrages against Israeli cities, and later US airstrikes on Iranian nuclear infrastructure. For Iran's leadership, showcasing missile power is meant to send several messages at once: deterrence to Israel, a warning to Washington, reassurance to domestic audiences, and a signal to partners in the so-called axis of resistance that the Islamic Republic is still capable of striking back despite heavy losses. Inside Iran, the political system is adjusting to this new reality under President Masoud Pezeshkian, who has been in office since July 2024 and now governs a country still reeling from war. He has tried to present himself as a leader who can avoid all-out catastrophe while still defending Iran's red lines. At the same time, the security establishment, particularly the Revolutionary Guards, continues to emphasize toughness and retaliation. That tension is visible in Pezeshkian's own words. After earlier Israeli strikes and threats of further action, he warned that Iran was not seeking a wider war, but would not sit idle if attacks continued. Masoud Pezeshkian said if the Zionist regime does not stop its crimes, it will face harsher reactions, and stressed that Tehran would respond more severely if Israel struck again. In another statement, Masoud Pezeshkian said Iran would make Israel regret its deadly attack on Iranian territory, including nuclear facilities. Those remarks frame the missile drills now taking place. They are not being sold at home as routine training, but as part of the same confrontation that saw Israeli aircraft hit enrichment sites at Natanz, Fordo and Isfahan in June, killing senior commanders and nuclear scientists, and prompting Iran's retaliatory missile barrages against Israeli cities. Iran's arsenal has been central to that confrontation. Over the past decade, Tehran has invested heavily in a mix of short, medium and longer-range ballistic missiles, as well as land attack cruise missiles and increasingly sophisticated drones. During last year's Sacred Defense Week parade, Iran displayed some 23 ballistic missiles and unveiled a new kamikaze drone that officials claimed could fly up to 4,000 kilometers, reaching targets across much of Europe and Asia. Analysts say the newer systems, including variants of the Khorramshahr and Qadr series, are designed to carry heavier warheads and penetrate layered air defenses. Iranian commanders regularly describe this missile force as the backbone of the country's deterrent strategy. Mohammad Bagheri, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, has warned foreign powers not to underestimate the consequences of striking Iran. Mohammad Bagheri said the reciprocal crushing and destructive strike of the Iran armed forces will be beyond imagination, providing a rapid response to any strategic mistake by world arrogant powers and the US regime. From Tehran's perspective, the events of this year prove both the vulnerability and the utility of that arsenal. When Israel hit Iranian nuclear sites in June, Iran responded with waves of ballistic missiles and drones that reached cities such as Tel Aviv and Rishon LeZion, killing civilians and damaging infrastructure, even though Israeli and allied defenses intercepted many of them. Officials in Tehran later touted new generation missiles used during follow-on operations, including the Sejil-2 and Qadr, which Iranian media describe as capable of launching multiple warheads and overwhelming enemy defenses. Yet those strikes came at enormous cost. Israeli and US attacks in June, and the days that followed killed key Iranian commanders and nuclear scientists, hitting the leadership of the Revolutionary Guards and damaging facilities that had taken years to build. According to regional reports, Israel's June assault killed the Armed Forces Chief of Staff Mohammad Bagheri and the Revolutionary Guards Commander Hossein Salami, among other senior officers, forcing Iran to reshuffle its military leadership mid-crisis. That shock is one reason the current drills are being framed so aggressively. Across Iranian media, officials stress that the exercise is not simply about defending the Strait of Hormuz, but about demonstrating reach, precision and resilience after losing some of the country's most experienced commanders. At sea, the Revolutionary Guard Navy now stages missile launches from both land and vessels, firing at mock enemy warships and coastal targets. In the air, drones simulate swarming attacks against bases meant to represent US or Israeli facilities in the region. And on land, mobile launchers fire salvos of cruise and ballistic missiles deep inland to underline Iran's ability to strike from dispersed sites far from the Gulf Coast. The message is aimed squarely at Washington as well. The United States, now under President Donald Trump's second administration, has tightened its military posture around Iran after earlier strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and repeated missile barrages against Israel, US. Officials say they want to deter Iran and its regional partners from hitting American forces or shipping lanes. One senior US defense official, speaking about the pattern of earlier attacks by Iran-backed groups, stressed that the United States had sent clear warnings to Tehran and that we will defend ourselves where necessary. In parallel, Washington has been deploying its own new systems to the region, including low-cost kamikaze drones modelled partly on Iran's Shahed series, designed to saturate enemy defences or strike mobile launchers. The US military says a new fleet of Lucas drones, developed for Task Force Scorpion Strike, is meant to counter Iran's massed drone tactics and to give US forces a cheaper way to respond. This evolving standoff is not confined to the Gulf. Iran's missile and drone technology is also at the heart of wider regional tensions from Yemen, where Houthi forces have used Iranian-linked missiles and drones against shipping and Saudi targets, to Iraq and Syria, where Iran-backed militias have repeatedly targeted bases that host US troops. Each flare-up raises the risk that a single miscalculation could trigger a chain of tit-for-tat strikes, spiralling into a broader conflict. For Israel, the latest drills only reinforce a long-standing concern that Iran is steadily expanding both the range and sophistication of its missile arsenal, while dispersing production and launching sites across the country and among regional allies. Israeli officials say that even with US and European help, defending against hundreds of simultaneous projectiles is impossible to guarantee, and that they must therefore strike Iranian capabilities preemptively when they see a serious threat emerging. Iran rejects that logic, arguing that its missile program is purely defensive and that it has the right to respond to attacks. Iranian leaders repeatedly insist that they are not seeking nuclear weapons and that missiles are their main tool for deterring adversaries who possess far more advanced air forces and, in Israel's case, an undeclared nuclear arsenal. At the same time, these displays are carefully choreographed for domestic consumption. After years of sanctions, economic strain and political unrest, the images of powerful missiles and disciplined troops are meant to project resilience. For many Iranians worried about jobs, inflation and the future, the message is that despite the losses of June, the state remains in control and capable of defending the country. That narrative is also about prestige. Officials regularly note that Iran is now one of the only non-nuclear states with a large and diverse ballistic missile arsenal, something Iranian media presents as a badge of technological achievement and strategic independence. Still, there are signs of unease at the top. In recent interviews, Masoud Pezeshkian has spoken about the limits of confrontation. He has suggested that Iran may be willing to resume some form of dialogue with the United States if there is respect and meaningful guarantees, while warning that trust has been badly damaged by the latest round of strikes. For now, those diplomatic possibilities remain theoretical. Negotiations have stalled. and both sides continue to signal readiness for further escalation if attacked. On the ground, the reality is that every new missile drill, every new test adds another layer to an already dense web of deterrence and threat. For shipping companies whose tankers pass through the Strait of Hormuz, the sight of missiles being launched nearby is a direct reminder that their routes are potential targets. For Gulf monarchies, it reinforces the need for ever closer security ties with Washington and, in some cases, quiet coordination with Israel on missile defense. For ordinary Israelis, the memory of sirens, intercepted warheads over major cities, and the small number of missiles that did get through, killing civilians and damaging energy infrastructure, has left deep scars. For ordinary Iranians, the destruction of nuclear facilities, the funerals of senior commanders, and the threat of further US and Israeli strikes have done the same. Today's missile drills are therefore more than military theatre. They are a live demonstration of how fragile the current balance has become. Each missile launch sends a signal outward, but it also feeds a cycle in which every side feels compelled to prove that it will not be intimidated. Iran's leaders insist that the show of force is meant to prevent war, not invite it. They describe a doctrine in which visible readiness, clear red lines, and the ability to inflict heavy damage are supposed to convince adversaries that attacking Iran would be too costly. Iranian media repeatedly echo the line that any new aggression would be met with responses beyond imagination, a phrase that has become a slogan of sorts for hardline commanders. But deterrence built on public displays can be risky. When each side feels compelled to answer the other's moves with its own show of strength, misinterpretations become more likely. A drill may be seen as preparation for a real strike, a test launch as a signal of imminent escalation. In such an environment, a technical malfunction, an errant missile, or a misread radar return could be enough to trigger a chain reaction. For now, the missiles raining down on mock targets in the Gulf are, as Iran stresses, part of an exercise, yet they are being fired in a region where just months ago real warheads hit real cities and where the next miscalculation could turn drills into the opening shots of a new, far more destructive conflict. The question facing leaders in Tehran, Jerusalem and Washington is whether these displays of power are bringing them further from that edge or step by step closer to it.